Hello viewers, welcome to week number 6 of Programming Fundamentals with Python. I am your resource person Kifayat. If you remember, in the previous week we studied about different types of operators that are available in the Python language. In today's lecture, we are going to cover another very important topic, and that is the decision control statement or decision control flow. So here is the contents at a glance. As usual, we will start this lecture with the objectives or what we expect you to learn at the end of this week. And then we will formally define what is the control flow and what are the different types of control flows available in the Python language. For example, sequential flow, decision control flow, and finally the iteration flow. At the end, we will focus more on the decision control flow. And inside decision control flow, we have different statements like the if statement, if else statement, if else statement, and nested if statement. So let us start with the objectives. At the end of this week, the student will be able to understand about the different types of decision control systems available in the Python language. They are the if statement, if else statement, if else statement, or multi-if statement, and then finally the nested if else statement. So it will enable the students to write simple programs which will include not only the decision control flows but also the operators, especially the relational operators that we have covered in the previous week. So you will be able to write simple programs which will include the use of relational operators as well as the decision control flow. First thing that come into our mind is what is control flow? Actually, the term is about the direction the program will take to execute the statements. How the statements of a program are executed, whether they are executed one after another, or they are executed based on certain conditions, or they are executed again and again until a certain condition is true. All these are examples of control flows. So it is actually a logical design that controls the order in which the statement or a set of statements are executed. And for that purpose, Python support a different number of control statements. So let us see them one by one. The first control flow or control statement that is available in the Python is called the sequential control flow. This actually refers to the line by line execution. That is, the statements are executed sequentially in the same order in which they appear in the program. So here you can see that we execute the Python statement at the top, and then we execute the second statement, then the third statement, and then finally the last statement. So actually, if you see here, these statements are executed one after another in the same order in which they appeared in the program, right? And here is an example. The first statement, that is age, will execute it, then the input will execute it, and then the print statement will be executed. So the statements in the sequential flow, they are executed one after another from top to bottom in the same order in which they appear. The programs that we have already seen till week number 5, all are examples of sequential flow execution. In this week, we will elaborate more the second category of control flow, which is called the decision or selection control flow. The decision control is a bit different. Although the sequential control is heavily used in programming languages, but it cannot handle every type of task, every type of scenario, or it cannot solve any kind of problems. Some problems simply cannot be solved by the sequential structure. So for that cases where the sequential control flow is not sufficient, we have to use either the decision control flow or the iteration depending on the scenario. What is decision control? Decision control actually is based on a condition, whether the condition is true or false. So if the condition is true, one statement will be executed, and if the condition is false, nothing will execute it, or another statement will be executed based on the type of control flow that we are using. So the decision control actually, they have if condition, and we base the execution of the statement based on the condition, on that condition. If that condition is true, execution of the statement will occur. If it is not true, then based on the type of control flow you are using, another condition, another statement will be executed, or nothing will be executed at all. A third type of control flow, which is going to be the discussion of the next week probably, is called the loop or repetition or iteration flow control. As the name indicate, here we execute the set of statements or a single statement again and again for a specific amount of time, or until the condition in the loop is true. So this is a control structure that will allow the execution of a statement or a block of statement multiple times until a loop termination condition is happen. If you see diagrammatically all these three types, here it is. The first is an example of sequential flow. As you can see, first block of instruction 1 will be executed, then block of instructions 2, and then 3, in the same order in which they appear in the program. So this is an example of sequential. Then the second category is the conditional, in which the execution of the instructions is actually based on a condition. If this condition is true, instruction 1 will execute. If the condition is false, then the instruction 1 will not be executed. Instruction 2 will execute, or if we do not have other instructions, then nothing will execute. This is an example of conditional control flow. Finally, we have the repetition. Here you see that a block of instruction is executed once, and then the line which actually refers back here indicate a type of loop or iteration or repetition. The same block of instructions will be executed for the second time, third time, fourth time. How many times? Unless the condition inside the loop is true. For example, you want this statement to be executed 5 times. Then you have to mention the condition. You have to declare a variable and give it a value, initial value, for example 1, and then final value is 5. Hey, execute this block of instructions 5 times. So it will be executed 1, condition will check. If the condition is true, execute it again, check the condition again. If the condition is true, execute it again, and so on. So this is repetition or iteration, in which the execution of the block of instruction happens again and again, or until a certain condition is true. Okay, so the focus of today's lecture is on the decision control flow, and inside the decision control flow we have different statements available. The first and the most simplest one is called the if statement. This is very simple to understand because it is based on the concept that how we actually take our everyday decisions. Most of our decisions are based on certain conditions. For example, I will go for shopping if I have this much amount, or I will take my umbrella if it is raining, or I will go to university if it is not Sunday, or I will meet my friend if I have my own car, etc. All these are examples of if statements. In a diagrammatical way, we can represent if statement like this. This diagram is called flow chart because it shows you the flow of the executions or the flow of the information. Here you can see different symbols. The symbols like the diamond sign or the diamond shape is referred as a it actually indicates a condition that must be tested before execution of the instruction. Once, if the condition is true, we will follow one path, and if the condition is false, we will follow another path. And you see the instructions are only executed if the condition is true. Otherwise, the instructions are skipped. Here, the square represent the set of instructions and the arrow lines represent the flow of information. So based on a condition, we actually decide whether we have to execute the instructions or not. So if the condition is true, then you have to execute the instructions. If the condition is false, you have to skip the instructions. Here is an example which is depicted graphically, and the example is based on the weather condition. If it is cold outside, wear a coat. If it is not cold, then you do not need to wear a coat. So here the decision is based on the condition of the weather. If the condition is true, the action wear a coat is performed. If the condition is false, the action is actually skipped. The action is conditionally executed because it is performed only when a certain condition is true. Programmers call this type of decision control a single alternative decision structure because it provides only one alternative path of execution. If the condition is true, execution will occur. Otherwise, the statements will not be executed. Now, how we can use this if statement inside our Python programs? So we have to follow a syntax, a general way, the rules and regulation that are specified for using if statement inside your programs, inside your code. The general syntax is like this. First, you have to use the keyword if. So if is a keyword followed by a condition. Condition is a Boolean value, true, false. It can be variable, constant, having different types of relational operators or logical operators depending on the problem. And then it is followed by a colon. In the second line, we have the statement or group or set of statements that we want to execute if this condition is true. And last thing, you have to remember the indentation. Remember, indentation are very important in the Python language. So you have to give a space, a tab here. This tab or empty spaces will tell the interpreter that it is actually the block of the if statement. It is actually the body of the if statement. You have to execute these statements if the condition is true, and you have to skip these statements if the condition is false. Here is another way to look at the syntax. There could be statements or set of statements or a single statement before the if statement. They have nothing to do with the condition. They will be executed sequentially. And then we have the if condition. If the condition is checked, if the condition is true, then the statement or group of statement will be executed. And then we have to put the colon at the end of the if line. And finally, after the if statement, we can have other normal statements of the programs which will be executed irrespective of the condition, because this is not part of the if statement. You see the indentation here. Here we don't have any indentation, so it is actually not part of the if statement. So these statements will be executed if the condition is true or even if the condition is false, because they have nothing to do with the if statement. Let us see some examples. Example number 1 is very simple. First, we need to put the keyword if, then the condition, then the colon, and then the statement or set of statements inside the body with indentation. So if this condition is true, the statement will be executed. If this condition is false, this statement will not be executed. So let us check the condition. 20 is greater than 10. Okay, the condition is true because 20 is greater than 10. So this statement will be executed. When you run this program, the output is going to be 20 is greater than 10. Okay. Second example. Here we have a variable and the name of the variable is number. And then on the right hand side, we are actually taking a number from the user with the help of input function. And we are telling that the number supplied by the user has a type of integer. For example, the user entered 10 here. That value entered by the user will be assigned to this variable with the help of this assignment operator. In the next line, we are actually checking the condition. Number is greater than or equal to 0. So remember, the user entered 10 here. So 10 is greater than or equal to 0. The condition is checked. Yes, 10 is greater than 0. So it will execute the statement which is actually inside the body of the if statement. And the statement is the number is a positive number. It will display. Now, for example, the user entered -5. It will be compared here in the if statement. -5 is greater than 0. No. -5 is equal to 0. No. So now the condition is false. Therefore, this statement will not be executed, and the output of this program is nothing, because this statement will only be executed if this condition is true. And the third example is that we are declaring a variable with the name weight, and we are accepting a value from the user, again integer. If the weight of the luggage or the weight of the suitcase is greater than 50 pounds, then the carrier of the bag need to pay an extra fee of $25. So when you run the program, it will ask for a value. For example, the user enters 60. 60 will be assigned to this variable. In the next line, we will check 60, or we will compare 60 with 50. And we will evaluate the condition and the result of this comparison. So 60 is greater than 50. Yes, condition is true. Then this statement will be executed. There is a $25 surcharge for heavy luggage. This statement will be executed. Now, what about this statement? Is it part of the if statement? No, it's not part, because you see the indentation. If you give indentation here, then this will become part of the if statement, and this statement will also be executed once the condition here is true. But in this case, it has nothing to do with the if statement. It has nothing to do with this condition. For example, if you enter 25 from here, so 25 will be compared with 50. 25 is greater than 50. No, condition is false. Then this statement will not be executed. What about this statement? It will be executed because it has nothing to do with the condition. But if you give an indentation here, then this statement will also not be executed, because now it is part of the if statement. Okay, the second type of decision control statement is if-else statement. As the name indicate, here we have to execute one thing if the condition is true, and we have to execute another statement or group of statement if the condition is false. So the basic if statement has a limitation. It do one thing if the condition is true, but it does nothing when the condition is false. To address this issue, we have another type of decision control statement, that is the if-else statement. If you want one thing to happen when the condition is true and another thing to happen if the condition is false, then you need to use the if-else statement. So it actually has two possible paths of execution. One path is taken when the condition is true, and the second path is taken when the condition is false. Again, there are plenty of examples of possible from our daily life which actually reflect the if-else statement, right? For example, you are hungry and you want to eat something. If you have enough pocket money, the condition is true, then go to a restaurant or a hotel and have your lunch or dinner. But if you do not have enough pocket money, the condition is false, you don't have money, then you have to eat at your home, right? So here in this case, we are actually taking one decision from two, or we are actually taking one path from the two available paths. One more thing, and that is a bit technical to remember, is that an if statement can also be followed by else statement, but this else statement is optional. The else statement does not have any condition. If it is false, then you have to go to the else. But if you don't want the else, you can skip it. When you skip the else portion, it will become the simple if statement. So statements in the if block are executed if the expression is true. And if you want to execute something else when the condition is false, then you have to use the else portion. Here is an example. Again, we are going to take a decision that is based on a temperature. If the temperature is less than 0, condition is true, yes, it's been a bit cold outside, so take your coat. And if the temperature is not less than 40, then it's mean the weather is nice, so you do not need to wear a coat, right? And plenty of other examples are possible. Let's suppose you want to travel to a place and you have your own car. So if you have your own car, go by car. If you don't have your own car, the condition is false, then go by public transportation. Okay, just like the if statement, we have a syntax to follow. We have rules, regulations to follow while we are using if-else statement inside our Python program. So the general syntax is here. Again, we have to use the if statement, the if keyword followed by a condition, Boolean expression, and then at the end we have to put the colon, indentation, and then a single or a set of statements which we want to execute once this condition becomes true. What's different is the else part. Here we are using the keyword else followed by colon, and then again, like the if statement, we have to give indentation, and which is followed by a single statement or a group of statements. So in this program, once this condition is checked, if the condition is true, statement 1 will be executed. If the condition, however, is false, then we have to come to the else portion and we have to execute the statement number 2. Remember, the indentation is important here and also here. Another way to look at the syntax is here. Before if, we can have other program statements. Then we have the keyword if followed by the condition and followed by colon, indentation, and then statements else followed by colon followed by statement or group of statements. At the end of if else statement, you can mention other program statements as well. Again, remember, we do not have indentation here, so it is not part of the if else statement. If it is not part of the if else statement, it has nothing to do with the condition. If the condition is true, or even if the condition is false, this statement or group of statement will be executed in either case. Let us see some examples here. Okay, example number 1, we have a variable with the name number. We are requesting the user to provide an input, a number of type integer, which is then stored in the number. And now we are taking decision over this number, the value stored in this number. This is a arithmetic modulus operator, which is used for finding the remainder. So the number input by the user is divided by 2, and then the remainder of this division is compared with the 0 with the help of equal operator. Now here in this statement, we actually have two different types of operators, modulus operator and equal operator. Both are arithmetic operator. It is used for finding the remainder, while this is used for comparison. Here the decision is based on the division, the remainder of the division, right? Let's suppose the user has entered 10. Here in this line, 10 will be divided by 2. 10 divided by 2, 2 5s are 10, remainder is 0. 0 is equal to 0. Yes, condition is true. If the condition is true, then this statement will be executed. It will print the number is even number. So this is actually a program for finding whether the number input by the user is an even number or an odd number. So we know if a number is uh, fully divisible by 2, then it is an even number, otherwise it is an odd number. For that, we have to check the condition here. If the number is divisible by 2, then it means that the number is even number, otherwise it is odd number. Now let's suppose the number entered by the user is 9. So 9 will be divided by 2. In this case, we get a remainder of 1. 1 is equal to 0. No, condition is false. If the condition is false, then this statement will not be executed. You have to move to the next statement, that is else. The else part will be executed. It will print that the number is entered by the user is odd number. And see the syntax. If is followed by a condition, followed by a colon, and this is the body of the if. Then it is followed by else. Else keyword is followed by colon and then a statement. Okay, last thing to remember is that here I put parentheses for the condition. That is not mandatory, it's optional. You see here in example 2, I do not have used the parentheses, so it is up to you. If you want to make things more clear, you can use the parentheses. If you want to left it out, doesn't matter, that's optional. Now example number 2. In this case, I have two numbers. I declare two variables, number 1 and number 2. Number 1, I am taking a value from the user and then I am assigning that value to number 1. Again, I am going to accept a value from the user and assign it to number 2. And then in the next statement, I am comparing these two numbers, the value stored in these two variables. Let's suppose the user has entered 10 here and the user input 20 here. So 10 will be compared with 20. 10 is greater than 20. No, 10 is not greater. So the condition is false. Once the condition is false, we have to move to the else portion. So the output of this program will be the number 2 is greater than number 1. Actually, this is a program for finding what is the largest number in any two number. You provide two numbers and then the program decides which one is the largest number, number 1 or number 2. So we are able to solve this problem with the help of if statement and by comparing these two numbers with one another. Okay, now I have a question. If we enter equal numbers, 10 here and 10 here, so what is going to be the answer? If portion or else portion? Think for a while. Well, it depends on the check here. If you put equal here, then the result is going to be something else. But here in this case, we do not have equal operator. So 10 is greater than 10. Is the condition true? No, 10 is not greater than 10, which means you have to come to the else portion, right? But here it will print the number 2 is greater than number 1. Why? Which means the program gives us an incorrect output because neither number 1 is greater than number 2 or nor number 2 is greater than number 1. They are equal. So it means we have a flaw in this program. It actually works for the numbers if they are not equal, but if they are equal, we need something else, a different logic. To answer that question, we have another type of control statement which is called if else statement. It is also called multi-way decision control statement because here you can check multiple conditions by using the if else statement. So when you need to choose from several possible alternatives, then an if else statement is used along with an if statement. So this is if else statement and then we are using another if else statement. So the else statement, as we saw, it must come at the end. And also what's new here is the elif keyword. Actually, it is the shortest form of else if. And it is useful to avoid excessive indentation. So the general syntax for this else if statement is here. This is the general syntax. Okay, just focus on the first two lines and the last two lines. This is exactly the same thing as we saw in if else statement. If condition statement, else another statement. What is different is the middle 4 lines. Here we are using else if, again else if. The number of else if is unlimited. It depends on your problem, your scenario, or what is given to you. So the number could be 1, could be 2, could be 3, and so on up to n. Okay guys, so if is a keyword, then we have to check the condition, and which is followed by a colon. If this condition is true, statement 1 will be executed. However, if this condition is not true, then we have to move to the next else if statement. Here we have to check the second condition. If it is true, then statement number 2 will be executed. However, if this condition is also false, then you have to move to the next else if keyword, and you have to check the third condition. If this third condition is true, then you have to execute statement number 3, and so on. If none of these conditions are true, then else is there. If nothing here is true, go for the else. Whatever it is, it will execute it. If all the conditions are false, no condition met the requirement, then we have to go to the else portion. So let me repeat, it is executed like this. In this case, multiple Boolean expressions or conditions are executed or checked. So only the first thing will happen. First, the Boolean expression 1 will be checked. If Boolean expression 1 is true, then statement number 1 will be executed. However, if Boolean number 1 is false, then Boolean expression number 2 will be checked. If it is true, then statement number 2 will be executed. If it is false, then Boolean expression number 3. If it is true, this statement number 3 will be executed. If none of these Boolean expression is true, then the statement last is executed because there is inside the else part. Okay, so there can be 0 or more else if parts, each followed by an indentation. An else part is again optional. There can be only one else block, right? If you are familiar with C language, C++ language, you will see that this thing is equivalent to the switch statement that we used in other programming languages like C and C++. And here is the flow chart. We start by checking condition 1. If it is true, statement number 1 will be executed. If that is false, then we have to check condition number 2. If it is true, statement number 2 will be executed. If it is false, then we have to check condition number 3. If it is true, statement 3 will be executed. If nothing is true, then we have to execute the else part of the program, and then statements after the if else will be executed. So an example, we are asked to write a Python program which accepts score from the user. The score must be between 0.0 and 1.0. If a user input a score which is less than 0.0 or greater than 1.0, then the program will have to print an error message. Hey, the score you enter is incorrect. Please enter correct value. However, if the score input by the user is within the range, so the program has to display certain messages based on the score value. If the score enter is greater than 0.9, then it will display A grade. If it is greater than 0.8, then it will display B. Greater than 0.7, display C. Greater than 0.6, display D. Otherwise, display F, which stands for fail. So when you see at this example, certain things comes into our mind. The first thing is that we are dealing with the floating point numbers. So we have to declare the variable as a float. Another thing is that the number must be within the range. If a number is outside the range, we need to provide an information to the user that the score entered is not correct, is not in the range. And finally, we have to implement these things. So here is the solution for this program. What you see is a variable score. We are asking for a value, enter your score. It must be of type float, and it must be within the range of 0.0 and 1.0. If the score is less than 0 or greater than 1, it will display an error message like wrong input. But if the score is within the limit, for example 0.5, so 0.5 is not less than 0 and 0.5 is not greater than 1, so it is a correct. So this print will not be executed because the condition here is false. When it is false, we have to come to the next statement. Let's suppose the score entered by the user is 0.5. So 0.5, now we have to compare it with 0.9. 0.5 is greater than or equal to 0.9. No, again the condition is false, so we have to skip this portion. Then we have to move to the next if else statement, else if statement. Again here we have to compare it now with 0.8. So 0.5 is greater than 0.8. No, condition is false. Move to the next portion. Again compare 0.5 with 0.7. 0.5 is greater than or equal to 0.7. No, condition is false. Then again this statement will not be executed. We have to move to the next else portion. Now compare 0.5 with 0.6. Is it greater or equal? No, the condition is false again. Then this statement also will not be executed. Now you see, none of these conditions met. None of these conditions is true. So none of these statements will be executed. What we left is the else portion, which is the optional. But in this case, remember, you do not need to check a condition at the else here, right? So if the condition is false in all the cases, then we have to execute this statement, your grade is F. So it will display your grade is F. Okay, finally we have another decision control statement, that is nested if statement. It's a bit confusing when you compare nested if with multiple if else statement. Even for majority of the problems, you can use either logic. You can solve a given problem with the help of nested if statement, or even you can solve the given problem with the help of a multi if else statement as well. So in some situation you have to place an if statement inside another statement. Like if you are going to use multiple, if you are going to check multiple conditions check, for that scenarios you can actually use nested if conditions. So an if statement that contains another if statement either in its if block or else block is called a nested if statement. The general syntax is mentioned here. You see, we have the if. Okay, first concentrate on the first two lines and the last two lines. It's a bit different. Here we are actually not using the statement. We are actually using another if. So this is called nested if, an if inside another. Another thing to remember is that this if could be part of the if, or it could be part of the else. In other words, you can place an if after if, or you can place an if after else as well, depending on the scenario or the problem with which you are dealing. Okay, so first we have the keyword here, which is if, followed by a condition, followed by colon, and then another if. But remember the indentation here. So it is the outer if, it is the inner if, or if inside another if, another condition, another colon, and then the statement will be executed. So this statement will be executed. This statement will be executed if both the conditions met. If this condition is true, then go to the next condition. If this condition is true, then execute this statement, which is statement number 1. However, if this condition is true, but this condition is false, then you have to move to the else. This else belongs to this F. You can see from the indentation. Okay. So if this condition is true, but this condition is false, then you have to go to the else and execute statement number 2. Now come back to this first if statement. If this condition is false, then this if will not be checked. You have to go to the else portion, which is here, and execute statement number 3. Here is an example about the nested if statement, which is again about the score, but now we are dealing with integer values. Okay, enter a score. Here the score has a fixed constant value, that is 70. So compare 70 with 60. 70 is less than 60. No, condition is false. So this statement will not be executed. We have to go to the else portion. You see here I have used the if inside the else. but here you can use it inside the if as well. Okay, then else, come here. Inside else we have to check another condition. If this condition is true, the statement will be executed, otherwise we have to move to the next else. So 70 is less than 70? No, it means this statement will not be executed. We have to move to the else portion. Here we have another if. Check the condition again. 70 is less than 80? Yes, condition is true. Then this statement will be executed. Your grade is C. Once we met the condition, other statement will be skipped. They will not be executed. So this was about different types of decision statement that we have available inside the Python language. Remember, we have two streams for this course, the theory and practical. So this was about the theoretical aspect of the decision control statement. If you want to look at the practical implementation of all these statements, please stay tuned and watch week number 6 practical videos. If you do not subscribe to the channel, please do subscribe as well, and you can share the videos with your fellows, with your family members, with your friends, so that they can also benefit from these videos. Thank you so much. See you. Goodbye.